Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. My name is David Szabo, and I work for a company called Virgil Security. We do end-to-end encryption, and I have a special guest for today on this webinar. We have Josh Marpet from Red Lion. And today we are going to walk you through what HIPAA compliance looks like from a legal compliance perspective or policy perspective, as Josh calls it, and also to show you how you can use end-to-end encryption to get there faster. So that's my short intro. So Josh, why don't you start with an intro?
Okay.
I'd love to get to know you better.
All right. So my name is Josh Marpet. I'm kind of the guy that's done everything. My hacker handle, and if you can't see the air quotes, it's because I don't have my camera on, but is Quadling. And so you can find my Twitter at Quadling. But I've been around the block a bit. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Red Lion right now. Red Lion is a information security consulting firm. We mostly specialize in compliance. We do some pen testing and various other bits, but really we're a compliance firm. And we did that because we realized that compliance is so important to what's going on in the world. The regulatory landscape is changing on a daily basis, from HIPAA to GDPR to 23 NYC 500. And we wanted to make sure that our clients were taken care of and protected and knew what was going on. So that's why we did that. But I come to this from a very varied background. Like I said, I'm an ex-cop, I'm an ex-firefighter, I'm an ex-horse dentist. No, that's not a joke. I mean, it is a joke, but it's not. It's a true joke, if that makes sense. Based on reality, dear God. I run B-Sides Delaware. So B-Sides Delaware is our local B-Sides group in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware. I'm staff at B-Sides DC. I've been staff at DEF CON. I was on the board of Hackers for Charity, as well as the board of B-Sides Las Vegas. I was a senior information security analyst at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. I've been around the block more than once. And as part of that, I've realized what's important. And frankly, for the most part, what's important is doing the fundamentals. And we're going to be talking about that today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Josh. And Josh, just a heads up, I just looked through my slides. I have my part of the slides, but do you have your slides that you can share?
I absolutely do.
Cool. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you. So Virgil, thank you for the intro. Virgil is the company behind Twilio's end-to-end encrypted chat. That's how we got famous about a year and a half ago. We are allowing Twilio to not sign BAAs because our technology and also their features together will consider Twilio to be a conduit business like UPS or the US Post Office, who just delivers messages and not stores them. And our end-to-end encryption enables users who are using Twilio to retain their HIPAA compliancy and without signing business associate agreements. And that's one way to be HIPAA compliant, and Josh and I will walk you through the details of that today. If you are Twilio users, just look for our white paper on Twilio's website. You can download more details of how that end-to-end encryption achieves HIPAA compliancy and with what features to use and what is the legal framework around allowing all that. If you email me, I'll be happy to email you the white paper and all the documents. We have a total of 3 documents for you to read through, or maybe pass it on to your CFO or to your attorney to make sure that you guys are sound on that side. And if you are using a solution or building a solution that is not as simple as just sending messages with Twilio, you can have Josh help you, and he's totally up for that. Today I'm here to announce that end-to-end encryption is not a fad anymore. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's true. End-to-end encryption has been in all these chat applications, and probably you guys are not using anything to chat today that is not end-to-end encrypted, unless you are just sending an SMS text message over your operator. You are probably using an end-to-end encryption end-to-end encrypted chat technology. So it's here to stay. It's not a fad anymore. And I'll show you why it's super important to learn more about end-to-end encryption and to be aware and use this technology more widely. This diagram shows you today's standard app security. You guys probably are all using HTTPS to transfer data from one device, from a device up to your front-end server. And then you protect that channel where the message or your data travels up to the front-end server. And then when data arrives to your front-end server, to a web service, it will be decrypted, terminated, so that you can look into that data and you can submit it into your database for storage. In other words, if you look at this diagram, the servers and the databases all have your data. And that's why it's super important to be HIPAA compliant today, because there you need to do a lot of work to protect that data. Once it landed, it arrived to the web server and to your database. You know, all that fencing that data around, all that protection of that data on every layer of your data center and in your application, it's a lot of work. And that's where data gets breached, even though you are taking incredible measures, and Amazon Web Services are too, to protect your data. Despite the best of your work, that's where data gets breached. What is end-to-end encryption? End-to-end encryption is when you encrypt the data in the mobile app or in the browser, and it will be the encrypted data that you'll send up to your web front-end servers and into your database. So the data is arriving there encrypted, and it remains encrypted throughout in your web front-end servers, in your databases. And then when that data is downloaded to another user, maybe from a patient to a doctor, it is still encrypted until it is displayed on the doctor's device. And it's that end-to-end key management that Virgil does, what our open source SDKs do, to make sure that that key on the left and that key on the right on the other device are working together to decrypt the data for the right users in your workflow. So that's end-to-end encryption. What does it entail, or what does it mean for your compliance? If you look at the bottom picture, the backend services know nothing about the data. They just blindly handle and store encrypted data for you. Also, you as a developer will not have access to your users' data. So this brings in a whole new world of protection for your data, that you don't really need to protect that data as hard as you have to do it today. Therefore, your HIPAA compliance is becoming a much simpler and easier and less costly process. And that's what Twilio and Virgil has done together as an example. But if you guys are not Twilio customers, if you're not in the world of messaging, then you can also implement this for yourselves, much simpler and cheaper than if you would have built up that whole protection for your data on the backend services. I hope this makes sense. And I'll stop here for a second, and I'll invite the attendees to ask us questions. I'd like to keep this webinar interactive, so I'll just pause for a few seconds, and if you guys want to type up any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Period.
Well, we've got one person in twice.
Yeah.
Yeses. But yeah, please, if you've got any questions, hit us up. We're more than happy to discuss any aspect of end-to-end encryption, HIPAA, regulation, what's going on in the world of healthcare. Go ahead and yell. Or, well, type, actually. Sorry, my apologies.
We can yell. Okay, and we'll see those questions later.
Absolutely.
So this new approach of data, of servers not accessing your user data, enables enables a whole set of new applications, whole new breed of applications. For example, these guys in Capitol Bells, they built the WhatsApp chat application for Capitol Hills in the White House, for politicians to end-to-end encrypted chat between each other. It's if you can, anybody can argue, but this application is in the core value proposition is end-to-end encryption and privacy. These guys, a healthcare startup in Germany, actually are building end-to-end encryption into health records management platform, so that patients and doctors can share data, share health records without the actual developers of this company or without anybody else in the system or the cloud service provider having access to the patient data. Also, we are working on the IoT side of things, which is also an important area for healthcare. If you guys are manufacturing devices, health data is super important. So these guys, Sora, built an intelligent light bulb that can actually behave like your Alexa at home, understand what you're speaking to it and act on it and learn your behavior. It's also end-to-end encrypted. So if you guys are building medical devices or working with medical devices, you know how important data and how much personal data is in there. And so at this point, I'll just stop. And I see a question from Rebecca. How intensive is it to implement end-to-end encryption? Thanks for the question, Rebecca. The end-to-end encryption to implement is fairly simple. I just go back here. End-to-end encryption is actually much simpler than if you built a system around or workflows around protecting your data on the back end. Before, technically the way it works, before you submit any data into your backend or into the cloud, you encrypt that data on the client device, in the browser, on the mobile device. And then once the data is loaded on another device, you decrypt it before you display it. To build that solution, you can use our open source SDKs to create public-private keys for users, and then the user public keys will encrypt the data, and the private keys will decrypt the data. And actually, I'll invite you guys to a webinar next week where we'll explain the very details of how to implement that. I'll send you guys a follow-up email. So if you want to learn more how to implement an encryption, join us next week, and you'll have a more detailed solution.
Hey, David, hang on one second. Chris Poelabar, and Chris, if I mangled your name, I apologize. Asked a question in the Q&A section. So if data is encrypted in the database, then cloud code would have to decrypt each time data is processed. Would end-to-end encryption have an impact on how cloud code is developed or operates? So that's a great question.
Yes,
so let's answer that real quick. If data is encrypted in the database, then every time somebody needs to access to process that data, you're right, it needs to be decrypted. If the database as a whole is encrypted, it's different than if each record is encrypted. So you're right. Let's assume that each record is encrypted. That's sort of the standard that Virgil is built around, if I understand it correctly. And remember, I'm not part of Virgil, but we're partnered, and so David will laugh at me and tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, it's not a problem.
Okay. Give it a try.
But if you have data encrypted in a database, let's assume I'm assuming from your cloud code that it's in the cloud. Okay. The impact on how cloud code is developed or operates, it matters because of when you need to use and process the data. If we're talking about the only time that the data needs to be viewed, processed, operated on, if that makes sense, Chris, it's at the end user device, then it doesn't matter, because the database stores a little blob of encrypted data. It knows that anytime somebody asks for whatever that address of that blob of encrypted data is, send it out. It gets decrypted on the end user device, and the end user is the one that actually does the decryption. Okay. Now, if it's something that you have to do data analytics on, so you have to get a lot of this data, these pieces, decrypted so you can do data analytics and re-encrypt the answers and then re-encrypt the data so that it's encrypted in the database, then yeah. but that's something that you plan out ahead of time. If you're going to be doing a healthcare system, you need to make sure that you have planned who is going to have access to the data, who is going to need the data decrypted, where is the data going to be encrypted, what do they need to use the data for, and if this sounds a lot like GDPR, it's close. Medical data needs to be planned out. You need to know, I mean, oh, the billing department needs to know this, but not that. They may need to know what the procedure was so they can bill for it, but they don't need to see the x-rays, you know what I mean? Or the imaging. The doctor that did your x-ray, for example, they need to be able to see the x-rays, but and the billing department needs to know you had an x-ray, and if the doctor is sick, maybe there needs to be somebody else that has access to them so they can see them in case you call up for an interpretation while your doctor is sick. So again, you've got to figure out who needs to have encrypted and decrypted access to that data. Does that make sense, Chris? If you can type it in chat, that'd be grand.
Yeah, Josh, this was a really good explanation. And so this is when somebody asks a question like this, that's when you realize that it's a whole new way of really taking the minimalist approach and asking yourself, exactly as Josh said, you know, who are the people who really have to access this data? Who are the people, who are the systems, which are the systems that really need to have access to this data? Instead of sharing it with the entire company, what are the roles in the processes that need to access this data? If it's a health app, it's simpler. If it's a large healthcare system like a hospital, Kaiser Permanente, that workflow is a little more complex. But I presume you would start one by one, one use case at a time to implement end-to-end encryption. And if you need access to data on servers, you can also implement that. But as much as you could, I suggest that you keep the system mostly for end users to decrypt data. And there's one more thought, Chris, that I wanted to share. You don't have to encrypt every piece of data in your system this way. So if you only encrypt 3 or 4 fields of your patient table, or if you only encrypt parts of the doctor notes, like the handwritten, the text part in the prescription or in the notes when you're meeting your doctor, you have already encrypted the juicy stuff, the stuff that you want to keep private and secret, the confidential stuff. So you don't really have to encrypt everything. You don't have to encrypt, let's say, the date of a visit, but maybe you'll encrypt the names of the people who participated in that visit and the doctor's notes as a follow-up for that visit. You don't have to encrypt maybe the birth year of the patient, but maybe you'll encrypt the month and the day and the name of the patient or the social security number. So you can decide for each field in your database if you want to encrypt it or not this way. There's one more question here in the chat from DS. Hi, my understanding is Twilio stores messages and PHI for logging and retrievals. Therefore, it's unable to pass as conduit. In this case, HHS says encryption, either end-to-end or REST, is inadequate for HIPAA compliance. Could you elaborate, please? Thanks. Yes, a very good question. Thank you, DS. So here's the situation with Twilio. Twilio is aware of that, and we know that this is the default way how Twilio operates today. And there's a switch there's an option that they, I think, enabled about a year ago, or pretty shortly after we announced our collaboration on their blog, that enables that makes Twilio delete all messages after they delivered. This switch will turn on Twilio to work in this minimalist conduit approach, where a message is only stored until it's delivered and then it's permanently deleted. There's no logging. There's nothing kept about the end user that would not pass the HIPAA requirements. And Josh will elaborate on this. We have 18 different identifiers that we have looked at with Twilio. Josh would elaborate on that and how we meet that requirement.
Yeah, that's a great question, DS. I'll be talking about that in my part of the presentation in just a couple of minutes. And please, when I start talking about that, let me know if it makes sense. Let me know if there's any questions or any follow-ups on that, okay? Let's talk about EPHI. HIPAA has very, very specific rules, as DS mentioned, and Chris mentioned, about EPHI. EPHI is electronic personal health information, all right? We basically all know what that is. But I'm going to start off with, first off, a little bit about me. This is me. I've talked about me. It's great. It's no problem. I've done a lot. Occasionally I get to sleep. I've done way too much for my world. But anyway, I'll leave that alone. So this is what bugs me, okay? HIPAA is not with two P's. It is with one. HIPAA is a female hippo. It is not a Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So let's stop doing that, okay? Sorry, pet peeve, had to do it. So, all right, so let's talk about HIPAA. HIPAA is incredibly important, all right? People don't even have their health information. They don't even know it exists. I mean, there's people that say, wow, I have health information that I have a right to? Yes. I can see this stuff online. I can get copies of it from my doctors. Yes, that's legally your right. So part of that is that we've got to protect it. Part of that is we've got to make it available. And a big part of it, again, is that we have to protect the data and only make it available to the appropriate people. That's you, the people you choose to give it to, and the people that need it, such as insurers, so they can pay for your procedures and so on and so forth. Okay. We also allow aggregated anonymized data to be used for research, but that's a whole different topic. So we just talked about this. Who owns the HIPAA information, the EPHI? I mean, there's a lot of questions about this. And I know I keep referring to GDPR. I apologize. I've been reading it over and over again, along with 23 NYCRR 500. They're big front of mind topics for me right now. And it's fascinating to me how HHS, Health and Human Services, really predicted a lot of the things that GDPR would be talking about. My data is my data. Who owns your medical data? You do. Okay, who has rights to it? Whoever you give it to. Now, whenever we go to a doctor's office, we sign away some of our rights. Well, what do you mean? Well, the doctor has to keep a copy, okay? And the health insurance companies have to get a copy so the doctor can get paid. Can any third parties get it? Well, some health insurance companies sell that data to third parties. It's rare, but it does happen. A lot of times it's sold in aggregated anonymized, so it really doesn't matter. It's okay if they want to tell me, do some good research and tell me how to extend my lifespan. I'm good with that. You know what I mean? But there are third parties that take this data and sell it, use it, process it, etc. But what do you need to do to secure it? And really, that's about the data itself. Well, part of it is that the data has to be secured in a methodology that keeps it away from individuating any one person. Okay? If I can take a chunk of medical records and I can bring it and go, that's John's. I know John. I know he's these exact conditions. I know if I can individuate it to John or Jimmy or David or Josh, then that's insecure, okay? So we need to make sure that medical data that is stored or sent over the internet, over a phone line, whatever, is de-individuated, okay? Make sense so far? Do me a favor, David, by the way, since I'm screen sharing, I can't see the chat window. So if a chat pops up, just stop me and let me know, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. So we can do two different things. We can do a de-identification methodology that has all of these things taken out of the data. Let me tell you, if you take all these things out of the data, it's kind of useless, okay? Or we can look at the data with an expert's eye and say, I can't tell who this is. I can't tell, I guess that's a chat. I can't tell who this data is about. I cannot individuate it, okay? And so that's what an expert's eye look is. So how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways, but basically you need somebody who's an expert in data privacy, forensics, cryptography, and various other things. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but technically I'm an expert. I am actually an internationally recognized forensic expert. I'm certified to testify in front of the Turkish Supreme Court. I am certified to testify in front of many circuit courts here in the US, and so on and so forth. I taught forensics for many years at the university level. So effectively, I'm registered. I'm sorry, there's no such thing as a registration. I shouldn't say that. I am valid as an expert to see if something is de-identified properly. Okay, but let's talk about what that means. So encryption is a way of de-identifying it. Is it mandatory to use encryption? Because everybody says you need to encrypt data at rest and in transit, right?
Yep.
The answer is no, it's not actually mandatory. It's addressable. So what does that mean? Addressable means you don't have to do it. But if you say you're not going to do it, you have to come up with reasonable and appropriate safeguards that are as strong or stronger than encryption, okay? So when we talk about encryption, it's kind of the easiest thing to do, because if you don't use encryption, encryption is pretty much automatically accepted as it de-individuates, it is secure, it's good for data, okay, in transit and at rest. But if you don't want to use it, that's fine. But then you've got to argue your case that what you're doing, whatever compensating controls you have selected, well, they're as strong or stronger than encryption. That's kind of tough, all right? So realistically, let's be honest. If you want to make sure that your data is protected, encrypting it is a real darn good step, all right? So, but does everyone have to be HIPAA compliant? Well, what do you mean? And DS, it was DS, I think, that asked about the conduit exception. This is exactly what you were talking about. The conduit exception, what does this mean? Well, just like if you remember net neutrality, there were a lot of people that were talking about common carriers, and they were talking about people that were classed as utilities and whatever else. It's sort of like different classes of providers, different classes of how you do business. And there's a telecom exemption, and this is the conduit exception is related to the telecom exception. The telecom exception is I'm not responsible for the data that goes across my networks because I'm just providing a way for them to send data. I'm not looking at it. I'm not examining it. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm just passing it across the network. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot me, okay? And the conduit exception is the same thing. If I transmit the data across my network, I'm not doing anything for that data. I'm not processing it. I'm not reading it. I'm not doing anything with the data. So if I'm not doing anything with the data, am I responsible to make sure that it's secure? Am I responsible to make sure that it's anything effectively other than transmitted properly and delivered across my network? The answer is no, not really. I'm not responsible for anything. As long as the data is encrypted or anonymized, as long as the data is transient and I don't store it, log it, handle it. I should clarify. I'm allowed to log that I had the data and that I sent, that I had data from X sent to Y, okay? That's it. I'm allowed to log that I sent, say, 3 terabytes of data for this client. And as long as I do that, basically for billing purposes, I'm fine. I'm not allowed to store the data, I'm not allowed to process the data, and I'm not allowed to read the data. As long as I don't do those things and I just simply transmit the data, I'm good. That is a conduit exception. And that DS is why when you flip that switch it's the SDK, if I remember correctly, of Twilio. If you flip the switch in the SDK, then not literally a switch, but you get the idea. If you turn it on, the proper code, it stops logging, it stops storage as long as it's delivered, or as long as it's not delivered. The message is stored until it is delivered, then it is immediately deleted. That is the only amount of time that it stores the message. And by the way, it is in the description for the conduit exception in the HIPAA HHS law. It actually states that it's stored just for as long as it needs to actually transmit the information. So that's fine. It's basically storing it just until it makes sure it gets delivered, and then it deletes it. So yes, under the conduit exception, Twilio should be no problem for the conduit exception under HHS and HIPAA. Does that make sense to everybody? Let's stop there for 1 second. Does everybody get that? Does anybody have any questions? And DS, do you have any follow-ups? And do me a favor, David, if DS does, can you read them to me, please?
Okay.
I'm going to wait just a couple of seconds. Tell me if you want to type something longer, and we'll wait for you to finish typing it. All right. I'm going to take We're
Yeah,
good?
yeah. Just FYI, in the meantime, I'm having chat with a couple of attendees just to clarify things. So keep going.
Sure.
This is going well.
Okay.
Now, actually, I have the very name of the Twilio conduit setting.
Oh, good.
Trying to look it up. One sec. It's called conduit. Yes, message body redaction. Let me.
Well, that makes sense. They're redacting the body of the message, and that works.
Exactly.
So they.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. So basically what they're saying is we hold the message until it's delivered, and then we redact the body of the message. So the actual encrypted health information goes bye-bye. Mm-hmm. Okay? So there is metadata there. There is, I sent it from, Twilio has logs that say, I took a message from Jimmy and I sent it to Johnny. Okay, mm-hmm. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's okay, because that's how they bill, or that's how they handle their accounting, billing, and usage systems. Mm-hmm. They're allowed to do some metadata as long as there's no information that can be individuated. Now, I can individuate that a message was sent, but I cannot individuate of the contents of the message. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that's totally legitimate, and we're okay there. So let's keep going for just a second. Is that okay for everybody? I'm sorry, I'll stop again and ask if anybody has any questions. Okay, let's keep going. So let's talk about this de-identification. Let's talk about this encryption. Let's talk about how we do it and how the expert eye, and I keep laughing when I talk about myself that way. I never consider myself an expert. I swear I'm still 12 years old in my head. But anyway, I promise I'm not. My first child's on the way. But anyway, so if you look at clear text, there's some clear text at the top of the screen. There's my name, there's a birth date, there's an SSN. It's not my actual birth date or SSN. Please don't be trying to open credit cards. You'll just be embarrassed. But if you encode text in Base64, for example, Base64 UTF-8, that string TKFNRT, blah, 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 that comes out. If you encrypt it with AES-256, that string at the bottom, KDLO, blah, 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 that comes out. Now, what's the big difference? All right, let's discuss the big difference here between encoded, encrypted, and clear text. Well, clear text is obviously, I have the data. I have the information in my hand to do damage, to individuate. That's bad. Well, encoding and encryption, I can't tell the difference. What's the big deal? Well, here it is. Base64 encoding can be reversed. It's just like a Caesar cipher, except much more complex. But I can decode that TKNFNRT string and decode it via UTF-8, and I come back with exactly, all the way at the bottom, name, Joshua Marpet, date of birth, SSN, you get the idea, okay? So this is a type of encoding, ROT13, and if anybody's ever heard of the Caesar cipher, or if anybody had a decoder ring when you were little, or did some transcription ciphers, this is what this is. This is basically, I'm switching letters from one letter to another. So I wanted to encode the word hello. I encode H with U, E with R, L with Y, and B with an O with B. So HELLO becomes URYYB. That's fine. Nobody can tell it's hello unless you can, but you still can reverse it. And when you can reverse it, it is not encrypted. It's not significantly unindividuatable. I can reverse it easily. It's trivial, as a matter of fact, to reverse ROT13 or Base64 or many other systems. And if I can reverse it, I can then individuate it. It's just that simple. Now let's talk about encryption. Encryption's a little bit harder. This is the crib sheet. This is the very quick version of how to encrypt using AES. This is a comic that is a beautiful comic. It's on the right over here, if you can see my mouse. If you really want to learn about AES, this comic is fantastic to understand how to AES encrypt something. It is terrifyingly complex, and it is not reversible, okay? You cannot reverse this without a key that is, and significant computing power. If you want to reverse this by using brute force, good luck, might take you a while. Okay, something like the heat death of the universe will likely happen before then. It's that complex. All right, well, let's stop here for 1 second. I just want to give you a chance to look at it. And while you're looking at it, does anybody have any questions so far? David, I apologize. I'm going to have to ask you to tell me if there are.
No, I stay quiet. There are no questions so far.
Okay. So here's the question. How hard is it to be actually compliant and secure? And don't worry, that's not an actual figure of somebody trying to be HIPAA compliant, I promise. Okay? Although I love the picture, I had to put it in. It is actually much easier than it sounds. Why? Well, seriously, it's possible to do because of tools like Virgil, okay? Because of tools that are out there to make it work. But, you know, look, everybody freaks out about it, so it must be complex. But then Virgil says it's simple. I mean, is it simple? Is it difficult? Is it complex? I don't know. And the answer is, you know, there's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of tools. There are self-assessment tools, self-audit tools. There are topics that you can discuss. You know, you want to go for privacy, security, and breach. Those are the 3 topics in the HHS HIPAA security audit protocols. Okay, so it's a whole different line of questions. Can we do it on our own? The answer is yeah. Honestly, if you want to try, go to town. Grab the HHS audit protocol. Sorry, HHS HIPAA audit security protocol sheet. And you go over these 3 topics. There's about 169, I believe. If I remember correctly, there's 169 questions in the audit protocol sheet, and you answer those questions. And if you can answer all of those questions satisfactorily, you're probably in pretty good shape. Okay, and then if that's the case, doing this alone does not hurt. Okay, as part of it, by the way, some of those topics are you sending information encrypted across the internet, across whatever transmission means you're using? Are you storing it encrypted, so in transit and at rest? Do you have a breach security process? In other words, if a breach happens, breach notification process. Do you have a notification process for who you have to notify? Do you have a crisis communications process? Do you have written policies on who gets access to the medical data? All these different things. So it's not a bad idea to start off on your own. And when you realize, hey, I might be running into things that I'm not sure about. I might be running into things that I don't know if we do. I might be running into things that I need help with. Well, that's fine. We've got help for you. Okay, it's not a problem. I mean, let me explain. Effectively, between Virgil and Red Lion, Virgil has very kindly offered a very simple thing. And I'm going to let David go into that. But basically, the idea is you're not alone. We're here to help you. We're here to help you answer these questions. And I hope we've answered the questions you've had so far. And I welcome more questions, by the way. As soon as I finish screen sharing, I'm going to go back and check the chat. But we welcome questions. We welcome comments. We welcome follow-up and feedback. And so I'm going to stop screen sharing and let David tell you about how we're going to thank you.
And while you're typing, I want to show you something that we have worked out with Josh. So Virgil, we have this April 30 deadline for a plan. If you guys sign up for a Virgil business plan, we'll get you 2 hours of free HIPAA consultancy. You can work with Josh and his team to help you answer your questions and prepare for HIPAA. And you'll also get support from us in implementing end-to-end encryption in your app. So that's the offer. Email me today if you would be interested, and we can help you get going.
And if you have any questions, please email us both and let's talk. I mean, we're happy to answer questions and do follow-ups like we said. I'd love for people to sign up with Virgil. I think it's a fantastic product. I know the founders of Virgil. I went through Mach 37 with them. They're great guys, and they're so smart. It is absolutely terrifying. Although one of them is currently without power in DC. I hope he got his power back. The snow is pretty bad. But they have built out some amazing, simple systems. They build products of the type that when they're done, you go, oh, yeah, of course. Why didn't I build that? Because you never thought of it. And, you know, I never did. And they did a great thing here. I strongly encourage people to take advantage of it. It makes getting your developers have encrypted data in the systems that they build a matter of minutes, not hours, not days, minutes to hours at most. And it helps me a lot because I don't have to worry about a lot of the things people do with their security. And it makes compliance a lot easier because I fill out the questionnaire with, it's handled by Virgil. It makes my life easier. So please use them. And then I get to talk to you anyway. So it's good.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. So one of the difficult things of building, one of the difficult things have been for us to build end-to-end encryption in a zero knowledge fashion is to really not use any shortcuts. If you look at like key management services, KMS or Vault or all those solutions today, they all use protective technology to protect your users' keys, but they can access those keys. What we built, this technology enables really to patients and doctors to own the data and not give out those keys to without giving out those keys to anybody else to take care of them. It's keys that we encrypt for you on the mobile device or in a browser with the user's password. So technically it's a full circle. Nobody will be able to decrypt the data without the consent from the user or the doctor. And you can decide how you use it, but it's a very special technology compared to all the other key management solutions today, in a sense that you don't need to trust your cloud service provider. You don't need to trust your Vault or key store to do a good job. You have to rely on your users giving access to others because they own the data and they own the keys. Email me and I'll also share you how Twilio did it to not sign BAAs. If you guys want to, if you guys need BAAs to be signed, we have other work in progress. We'll soon launch a sample that works with PubNub. PubNub is a HIPAA compliant chat provider that signs BAAs and will give you guys guidance how to build that end-to-end encrypted key management around PubNub. And we have other partners that we're working with as well. Soon we'll have a sample for Nexmo if you're in Europe and you want to work, you want to enable maybe your GDPR users to use end-to-end encrypted chat, and you want to be GDPR compliant and HIPAA compliant at the same time. Thank you all for joining us today and for the attention, all the good questions. Thank you, Josh, for guiding us through the legal framework of end-to-end encryption, data de-identification, the conduit rule, and all those things that are not obviously are not clear for the first look. So we'll follow up with you guys. I would also encourage you to join our Slack. If you don't have our Slack, if you're not on our Slack, I'll send you an invite. You can join us. We have a HIPAA channel there where you can ask follow-up questions, and we're always happy to get you guys going by using end-to-end encryption. So that's all we planned for today. And again, email us. Here's my email address, dave@virgilsecurity.com, and I'll send you over Josh's email address in the follow-up email as well.
Thank you, everybody.